Oh, good morning, everyone. Morning. My name's Sam Walley. I am been in the Marketing Cloud world community area for nearly 6 years now. And what I want to talk today about is ultimately just contacts. From my perspective, thank you very much, Louise, is that the contact is a conversation not often had in Marketing Cloud, especially if you're looking at a more independent level without any connect or anything like that. We always talk about the subscriber, and obviously the subscriber is the individual in Marketing Cloud where realistically the contact is. So without further ado, let's have a conversation. What I mean by this is I'm just going to go through a few areas within contacts to really sort of sell the benefit of contact and realistically contact builder. So generally speaking, we're looking at 4 steps from my perspective. So this is all a little bit of opinions, so apologies in advance. We've got planning, building, testing, and administrate. So what we mean by each of these, obviously planning, essentially what we're going to do with our data, what is our data doing, why do we have data in Marketing Cloud in the first place. Once we decided that plan, to apologize, the next step would be naturally to then start working on building said content or with our contacts. And then testing, or ultimately testing, sort of falls in the same category of actually using them. And then just a conversation at the end to talk about sort of administrate. Apologies for the images here. That is literally what PowerPoint gave me when I started searching those words. For some reason, when you think administrate, you think of a hand holding a heart, which is, now saying that aloud sounds quite morbid, but we'll move on from that. So first off, planning. Now, from my perspective, the simple way of looking at things is, why is our data in Marketing Cloud? And I'm not just talking about contacts, I'm talking about all works of data, whether it is, well, as we would describe as non-sendable data. So your purchase information, your survey results maybe, or again, it all depends on where you are in the business. Obviously, it could be your purchase, could be your coupon codes, whichever. The fact of the matter is, the best way of looking at it is any data that we have in Marketing Cloud should be related to a contact. At the end of the day, that data's in there so we can communicate to these contacts and also personalize their experience. So if we have data that has no relation to a contact at all, I would beg the question of, well, why do we have it in Marketing Cloud in the first place? Because ultimately, if we can't relate it to the contact in some form or fashion, we're not using it in Marketing Cloud. We're not comparing it to Sales and Service Cloud and other core elements of Salesforce. We have data in Marketing Cloud to communicate to a contact. So if we've got purchase data, that purchase data in some form or fashion needs to be related to the contact. So we can then utilize that information effectively. So I've got a few sort of in-house demos, as you can see here. So I am currently in Contact Builder. So this is my demo environment for the company I work for. In here, I've got a data extension called Purchase Data. Straightforward enough, isn't it? Just data that contains a loading screen. There we go. Information about the purchase, so the purchase ID, the SKUs, amounts, purchase dates. Of course, we have the customer ID, because that is how this data is related to the contact. Straightforward enough? Yeah. So with that in mind, the next step is to start building it. Now, we've done the building, essentially. Well, I've done all these demos. There's only one demo at the end where I actually start building things to showcase to you, but a lot of this has already been done for the sake of the presentation. Obviously, generally speaking, within Marketing Cloud, we will use Contact Builder to manage not just contacts, our data. So whether it is that purchase data or our data filled with contacts, our data extension containing contacts, we try our best to manage it within Contact Builder. And from my perspective, especially with a couple of clients I've spoken to over the last couple of years, I'm still finding people managing their contacts and their data in Email Studio, which, you know, if you're dealing with a relatively simple, straightforward data management, that works, it's fine. But obviously, when you want to get the most out of your contacts, out of your, you want to be working on it within Contact Builder. Now, so generally speaking, we need to make sure that data is related to the contact. And how do we do that? Does everyone know? Where do we go in Contact Builder to create relationships across all our pieces of data? It's right there. I realize I'm going to ask the question. You're not going to hear it in the video, are you? Yes, someone did answer attribute groups. Correct. Yeah, we would already do it within Data Designer and our attribute groups. So, of course, within Data Designer, for those who don't know what Data Designer is essentially where we create our relationships between all our pieces of data in Marketing Cloud, ultimately to the contact. It's treating the contact as a single source of truth. So whether it is mobile data, email data, purchase data, whatever, we all relate it to the contact. And ultimately that demonstrates the difference between a contact and the subscriber. The best way of looking at it is, whilst a subscriber is an individual specifically opted into a certain channel, so whether it's email, mobile, whichever, a contact is basically representing an individual no matter what they are subscribed to. One way of looking at it, a phrase I always use, is all email subscribers can be contacts. But then again, not all those contacts would necessarily be email subscribers, because we could have a contact that's also instead just a mobile subscriber. So in attribute groups we have here, this is where we build these relationships. So going back to what I was discussing before with our purchase data, that data extension on its own isn't doing a great deal without this. I mean, you can reference it with AMP script and various other languages within the system, certainly. But at the same time, like I said before, we are having this data in here for a reason. So that reason is to be related to the contact. So I realize now I've had a colleague that's been working on this system. So he's got quite a few attribute groups in here. So let me just zoom out a second and try and find the one I want to show you. There we are, purchases. So if I go into this attribute group, we can see how this purchase data extension that I've been creating or have created is related to the contacts. And generally speaking, if you hover over this, I think generally speaking it's just fact. If you hover over that, you can see that we're using that customer ID to be related to that contact. That means we can then look at that single contact and see all that related data to the that purchase. So we can see all their purchases and such. So that on its own, just building an attribute group, you do it, then great, they're related. Brilliant, I've done my job. Why? Why have I got this relationship? So that sort of leads me into my next conversation. Oh, excuse me, go to the right slide here. Testing. So why are we building these relationships? And obviously one of the forefronts of all those conversations rely on Journey Builder. The wonderful tool that is Journey Builder. Of course, I'm sure we'd all agree, we all love Journey Builder. There's no concerns, complaints at all. If they are, keep them to yourselves. I'm joking, of course. Yeah, so within Journey Builder, we have then the ability of utilizing all that contact data. So whether it is using contact filters in our entry source, whether it is setting up goals to measure success of our journey, our exit criteria, which allows us to obviously exit the journey whenever we want, whenever our contacts want, or whenever we want our contacts to exit. Got there in the end, sorry folks. Or decision splits. We can use this contact data. And so it goes, again, this a bit of conversation you can see here, but let me go into this system and show you. So if I'm going to navigate back to Journey Builder, I'm going to build a journey from scratch, just to showcase some of the areas we're going to start working with this contact data. And what I'm actually going to do as well, whilst I'm thinking about it, is reopen Contact Builder in another tab. I can go back and forth that shortly. So if I create a new journey, I'm just going to do a multi-step journey here, just so I can showcase all the functionality. I'm going to build a journey with a data extension entry source. Straightforward enough. I'm going to set my data extension. I've I've got a data extension called master subscribers. Don't worry about that error message. It's just because we use this data extension for a lot of stuff. So it's just giving me a warning that it's in another journey as well. So you might have some conflicting elements there. Straight away, we get introduced to our filtered contacts. So this is where, ultimately, this master data extension is essentially a data extension containing every single one of our email subscribers. So whether it is whether they come from a form or just an automation, they're all going into that master subscriber data extension. Now, it goes without saying, very rarely will I find myself in a situation where I'm going to build a journey for every single person in my data. So what I need to do is obviously segment. And so where we can use filter contacts, we then have the ability of using all those wonderful relationships in Contact Builder. So straight away we see an option here called Contact Data. I click on that, and we get this abundance of lists of individuals here. So what this is all those attribute groups represented in this screen here. Okay? And so when I start selecting the attribute group I want to use, so if I go down to, let's use master subscribers one for now, I then have access to all, the next tab will take, the next section rather, will take me to all the data extensions that are in that attribute group. So I've got the master subscriber ones here, I select that, and then I can start accessing all those attributes and start building a filter here. So if I just use interests, and put interest equals to Marketing Cloud, what I'm doing is utilizing that data from Contact Builder. And that is building an entry source there. Generally as well, you might find yourselves in a situation where you would build a filtered data extension first. And in my opinion, there is perfect merits using one or the other. My personal opinion, I always opt in for going to a filtered data extension that gets refreshed in automation. It just makes the scheduling of my entry source a little bit more straightforward and a bit more robust. But obviously, we're not here to talk about it. We're here to talk about the contacts. And I'm going to go into another section of where we can use our contacts, which of course is our goals and exit criteria. So as you may know, we can measure the success of our journeys using goals. Now, there is two things to consider here. In fact, before I show you this, let me just go into decision splits because it will give me the option I want to show you. If I add a decision split straight away and start creating my criteria here, I'm met with two types of data. So contact data and journey data. There is a difference between the two. So when when someone joins the journey from our entry source, a snapshot is taken of their data. That is journey data. So journey data is basically representing our entry source. So that snapshot is a snapshot. So if, for example, their data was to change halfway through the journey, say we've got like a 2-month-long journey, and let's say they've moved out, moved location, they may have gotten married, and so the data changes. Not in journey data, it's a snapshot. So one of the benefits of using contact data with our journeys is the fact that it's real time. So it's coming straight from the data extension rather than that snapshot. So with that in mind, I can then build a decision split here using contact data. And what I'm going to use actually is the purchase data attribute group. So whilst this is not the data that I've used in my entry source, because of that, those attribute groups we build, we can use all that data because they're related to one another. So I'm going to do a criteria here based on the amount, saying amount is, let's go for greater than 300. Okay? By proxy, my remainder will be everyone that is less than 300. In fact, let's be a little bit more, let's keep to good practice. Write that in here. Actually, I suppose realistically it would be, oh, it's fine. I would argue it's 300 and less, isn't it? 300 or less, but never mind. We can all pretend. So So again, that's one of the benefits of using contact data versus journey data. So with that in mind, going back to the topic I was going to talk about before is obviously our goals, which means the only option here is contact data, which logically makes sense. You wouldn't be able to use journey data in our goals because they're snapshots in time. If we have a way we want to measure the success of our journey, why would we use journey data? Because the data is not going to change. We want that data to change. That's how we deem this journey successful. So that is where you would build your goals there. And you can say a similar sort of process. You then also choose your criteria. Let's say purchase data and say purchase date is not null. So essentially the goal there, I mean, bear with me, of course, the journey is nonsense, but it's just demonstrating all the functionality in one location. But I can put a goal here that says the purchase date is not null, so basically what we mean there is our goal is they make a purchase. So that's what I've got there, and then I'll hit done, and then I go next, and I can simply put my value of how many, the criteria is how a subscriber adheres to the goal, where our summary here is where we can measure what we deem successful. So if I put down here, scroll down a bit more, percent of population, and type in 30, what I'm saying here is I want 30% of my contacts in this journey to have made a purchase. And there you go. And so there are just some of the few ways that we can work with our journeys with contact data. Other things include, of course, our exit criteria, which I won't demo because I've only got 20 minutes and I feel like we've also going a bit behind. But it's a bit of not identical process to building that goal. Also, what you can do is in our journey settings, define our default email. So by default, it will use the email address from our entry source. Of course, if we want to, perhaps we're building the journey, but we're not actually contacting the contact, perhaps contacting someone related to them or different content, you can go into our contact data and find a different email address. And so then, again, all these flexible ways of working with contact data is mainly shown in Journey Builder. Now, one thing I will talk about as well is just a quick overview is thanks to the wonderful world of GDPR, which I'm sure, was it 5 years ago? We all had lots of fun working with, didn't we? Great fun. One of the things that came from that was obviously contact delete. Now, what this is, again, this is a situation I have dealt with many customers. I'm sure us consultants here have dealt with the same problem, where they've gone into a data extension, they've deleted the data extension containing subscribers. Right, yes, there we go, we've deleted them, all gone. Well, if you go into the all contacts list, you'll still see that volume of data. Recently, I had a customer who was expecting to have 20,000 contacts. They had 90 because they've been deleting it all wrong. Because when you delete a contact from the all subscriber list or from the data extension, you're not actually deleting that contact. They need to be removed from the all contacts list. Some years ago, that actually wasn't possible. At least not simply anyway. So now, obviously, Marketing Cloud have introduced contact delete. So if I go back into Contact Builder and first I'll go to contact configuration. And the one thing you need to make sure is it is switched on, which is lovely. But if I go to the all contacts list, you have this option here to delete contacts. So there are several ways we can do this. You can obviously pick individuals, go into the bin here, and then delete selected contacts, or I can be a little cleverer and delete from a data extension. So you're basically picking up the contacts from the data extension based on what that contact key is going to be in there, and it will remove them from everywhere in Marketing Cloud. So that's what we did with that client of mine, is rather than we're going to automate it now anyway, but the plan was to ultimately change their culture. So rather than deleting the data extensions there, they delete it here. Delete the extension here, you're going to delete the contact as well. So it's gone. Now, of course, being aware, of course, there is executing the right to be forgotten, as we are in GDPR now. So that does mean you lose that tracking data as well. So there's obviously a thought process there about what you want to do with all that analytics as well. So maybe doing some exports of those analytics and then getting rid of the contacts afterwards. There we go. So when you delete them, when you go through delete, it will, let me show you. It will show you that it's deleting from everywhere. And if I go to delete contact, it does pen for 2 days. So it's going to sit in there for 2 days before actually being deleted. Obviously, we don't want to be making mistakes, do we? And that's ultimately, on perfect timing, my session. So I've got a bit of time for some questions. Do you guys have any questions? Go ahead. So with the connector, those attribute groups get created automatically. So when you're so what we got within the connector is the ability of syncing over our objects into Marketing Cloud. That will automatically, so there will be an attribute group. I think I've got one here. Is that the one? That's the one. That actually builds the relationship automatically. So it bases around that lookup relationship on Salesforce and creates an attribute group accordingly. Is that the question you're asking? That's what's happening here. So the moment you sync over a data extension, it will create that relationship for you. Go ahead. I suppose realistically, it's the scenario of the journey. It's just if you need a snapshot and you wanted to use how it was in the condition when they joined the journey. So maybe based on, say, at the top of my head, I'm thinking like an appointment or something, where we basically want to keep the data that was at the time. We'd use it then. I think it's at the top of my head, I've got a better one. I'll have to get back to you. But realistically, it's a case where you want to use the data in the state it was in when they join the journey. To make sure we don't accidentally send any communications we shouldn't do. Of course, yeah. That's a good example of contact data, yeah. Good. Mission accomplished. Anyone else? Brilliant. Well, okay. Thank you very much, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day. And find me if you need to talk about anything.